All right, so we're going to our readings and we're going to discuss our poetry readings. We've already discussed the Red Wheelbarrow. So let's open this Road Not Taken. This gets read at a lot of graduations. Let me get that shared with you so you can see it as well. All right, are you able to see the Road Not Taken? Yes, no. Awesome. All right, who would like to read the first stanza to us? I know it by heart, so I don't need to read it. Who can read the first stanza to us? Awesome. If you're only reading the first stanza, I will scroll for the next stanza. Yep, just the first stanza. Great. Who can read the second stanza? Francisco, thank you. Excellent, thank you. Who can read us the next stanza, the third stanza? Brooks and Francisco are off the hook. Who's next? Great. Great. And the last stanza, please. Thank you. Excellent. So let's talk about some of our terms. How many lines are in each stanza? 5. Do we have a rhyme scheme? And what is it? Well, we have, if we label, when we do poetry rhyme schemes, we label them A, and then the new sound would be B, and if A repeats, we put A again, and if B repeats, we repeat B again. So if we label the first line as A, what other lines would be labeled with A with the same sound as would? Right, so it would go A, and then the new sound would get a B. A, B, A, B. And let's see if we have the same A, B pattern in the next stanza. Fair, claim, so there's A and B, where they're same. So we do, we have a rhyme scheme that goes A, B, over and over again, okay? Do we have a meter? Let's count the number of units. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And B, 1 traveler long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other just as fair, though having perhaps the better claim, as it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. So it's loose, but it's a beat of 4 every time. Does that make sense? We're getting 4 major stresses in each line. So we do have a rhythm. right? It's a loose rhythm. He doesn't want it to sound that stupid when you read it. He doesn't want it to sound like that, all sing-songy, so he breaks it up so that it sounds more like regular talking. And this is one of the things that Robert Frost was famous for, was following rhyme and meter, but not having it sound sing-songy like that when you read it out loud, right? Now, the meaning is broken up into lines. So the first sentence ends in the third stanza, right? That's all one sentence until you get to the third stanza. So he takes one sentence and he breaks it up into, let's see, 10, 12 lines of poetry is one sentence, right? Are there any other terms that you see at work here? It's not a ballad because it's not a 4-line stanza. It's not blank verse because it doesn't have 5 beats per line or 10 syllables. But what else do we see? We do see a rhyme scheme. What else do we see? Someone's got another video or something going on in the background. Let's curtail that, please. All right, so what other terms do we see here? Imagery? Do we have imagery in this poem? What do we have for imagery? Don't make it harder than it is. What are the images in this poem all about? The woods. Yeah, he's in the woods. Right. Yeah. So what's our literal meaning here? What do these words literally mean at their most basic, here's exactly what the poem says, and this is all I know meaning? What is this poem? What's happening in this poem? Yes. Okay. So a guy is taking a walk in the woods, and what happens? Don't make it harder than it is. We're talking about the literal meaning here. He's taking a walk in the woods, and what does he see? And he stands there, and he realizes he can't go down both roads at once, and he stands there and thinks about that for a while. That's it. Technically, that's all that's happening in this poem. Now, I'm going to stop the share for a second because I know this poem by heart. And I'd like to see you when we talk about this. So let's talk about the figurative meanings. Let's talk about the bigger meanings. What does this poem make you think about? Let's get our cameras back going. Let's talk about what the bigger meanings of this poem are. What are the bigger meanings of this poem? What does it make you think about? Why does it get read at all sorts of graduations? Right? Themes. What theme do we see in this? The future. What else? If you had to name the theme of this poem, what would you say is the theme of it? Okay, so choices. That's a great theme to observe here. And we pick it for graduations because of that line, that has made all the difference, right? So if we're thinking about this poem in terms of choices, what does it tell us about our choices? Two roads diverge in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. What does that mean? Right, you've got to make a choice, right? Most people cannot do two totally different paths in life at once, right? The same way you can't walk down two roads at the same time, right? And then later in the poem, he says, but knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. Now, if you're really just taking a walk in the woods, you can totally go back another day and take the other road. Done it myself many times. Gone to Moss Rock, walked all the trails. Different day, different path, I'm walking them all. So we know that this isn't literal anymore, because if it were literal, he could totally just go back another day and walk the other path, right? So now what is that telling us? Knowing how way leads onto way, I doubted if I should ever come back. What does that mean? Yeah, the further you go down one set of roads, the harder it is to turn around and go back the other way, right? My daughter and I were on the far side of a 3-mile loop one time, and she's like, let's take a different path. And I was like, no, baby, um, there's only one way back. And to go a different way, we would have to go back to the beginning and start over. So it's that realization that the further you go down one road, the harder it is to turn around. Is it impossible to turn around? No, I see students at Lawson all the time who are like, I've been doing this for 20 years and now I want to change and I want to do this. And they come back for the courses that they need to make that change. And that's wonderful. That's life right there, right? So sometimes, Shannon, I think you do get a do-over. Yeah. It's just hard, right? The do-overs are hard. My students who are starting over get frustrated because they're like, ugh, I feel like I'm 18 again. Nobody wants to be 18 again. Half of us don't want to be 18 the first time around, right? So, right. So he's thinking about that, of how hard it is to come back and do over. But then at the end, and this is the part where it always makes me roll my eyes that they discuss it at graduation, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. How many of you look back on the things that you chose not to do in life with a sigh? I could have done that and I didn't. And when you sigh that way, are you like, yay, thank goodness I didn't do that? Is that the sigh, or is this a sigh of regret? So why on earth are we reading this at graduation? You're going to pick a path and years from now you're going to regret it. It's not. Oh, okay. So now when you hear it at graduation, I've ruined it for you. I'm sorry. But I don't think he doesn't say he's going to look back on it and cry. He doesn't come out and say it's regret. How many of you look at something in your life with a little bit of a sigh? Your life is happy. It's a good life, but you have something that makes you sigh. Anybody have one of those? Yeah. Yeah, I have one kid. I would have loved to have a pile of them, but we have one. I'm thrilled with the one, but when I look at people with their little babies and their second children and their third child, I go, ah. And yet, great life. I got a great life over here. It's fantastic. God knew what he was doing when he only gave me one. I get easily overwhelmed. One is good, right? But there's a sigh. It doesn't mean it's ruined your life, right? But there can be a sigh. Right? And it has made all the difference, right? It does make a difference. The shape of your life is the shape of your life because you chose the road you chose. Is he talking about choosing a better road? Because both that morning equally lay and leaves no step had trodden black. He's actually saying that they're pretty much even. Like I could go this way or I could go this way, but it's going to make a difference. I remember choosing colleges and I remember thinking, okay, I could go to this college and I'd go over this way and I could choose this college. And it's changed the path of my life. I don't really know if it was for good or for bad. Maybe I would have been a different kind of fantastic life over there. But I thought to myself, whatever I choose, something will happen and it'll be good. And so I kind of threw a dart. It happens, right? So he's talking about that. He's pretty subtle about it. He's a subtle kind of guy. But there is that sigh in there. Don't forget the sigh. All right, let's talk about mending wall for a minute. I'm going to get to mending wall here. Open that up. All right, we are at mending wall. This, let's see if we can count. Are you able to see it with me? Or do I need, no, I need to share it. Haha, hold on. Screen share, screen share, screen share, share the screen. Okay. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen groundswell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I've come after them and made repair where they have left not one stone on a stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The gaps, I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made, but at spring mending time we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go. To each the boulders that have fallen to each, and some are loaves, some so nearly balls we have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are till our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game, one on a side, it comes to little more. There where it is we do not need the wall. He is all pine and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. He only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? There are no cows. Before I built a wall, y'all listen for the pun here, please. There's a joke coming up. Joke alert. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Get it? Offense? Offense, y'all? Come on, that's good. But all right. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly, and I'd rather he said it for himself. I see him there bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand like an old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only in the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well, he says it again, good fences make good neighbors. So I'm going to stop this share. We're going to talk about this. First of all, we got some blank verse here. We're not rhyming, but bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top. We got 5 major iambs in each line. He says, again, good fences make good neighbors. So 5 stresses in each line. That's that 10 syllable roughly. So this is a blank verse poem. And when we're talking about it, what's the famous line? It's almost a refrain because it comes up twice. What's the famous line from this poem? Do you know? Everybody always quotes it. What's the big quotable line that's everybody's takeaway from this poem? Right, and yet this is the thing he's actually questioning. Why do good fences make good neighbors? Everybody takes this poem and go, oh, good fences make good neighbors. And Frost is actually questioning that and asking, why do they make good neighbors? And the neighbor doesn't want to hear it. He's just like, they just do, man. So when it says he doesn't want to go behind his father's saying, it means he doesn't want to think about it. He doesn't want to investigate it. So Angel, Brooks, and Nolan, I can't see you anymore. So we're getting, hello. So we've gotten somebody who won't think about it. And you got to think about it for a second. Robert Frost is this little shrimpy guy. He's probably shorter than me, and I'm like 5'6". He was probably like 5'6", 5'7". He was my height, right? And the neighbor he's talking about is clearly a big dude. He can palm a boulder. So he's a big guy, right? So you got to picture this little Robert Frost looking up at his neighbor who's probably, remember, Robert Frost was living on a farm, but he was a poetry teacher at a college. So he's not a farmer, right? He's not a tough guy. He's kind of an outsider and he's a thinker, and this guy's a worker. And there's different attitudes between thinkers and workers, right? And when I was little, my neighbor used to tell a story about meeting Robert Frost, and his name was Bob Brigham, and he was a tall guy. Um, and Robert Frost was a little old man at this point, and he walked up to my neighbor and said, "Well, who put shit in your shoes, young fella?" Made him wonder how he got so tall. So you got to kind of remember this little guy looking at his neighbor being like, "Is it elves? Is it elves though?" And the dude's going to be like, "What are you talking about?" His neighbor is a serious guy. He's found this phrase. And he's kind of playing with it and thinking about it and being. He reminds me of my dad. We went to a mini serve gas station one time, and my dad also like 5'10", not the biggest guy. This huge, like 6'3", muscly guy comes out and tells my dad to step away from the pump, because my dad was like, "Mini serve, do I pump my own? Do they pump it for me?" This guy comes out, he's like, "I'll do that." And my dad goes, "Oh, you must be Minnie." We're all like, "Oh, Dad's gonna die. He's gonna die." He called this giant guy Minnie. And that's kind of what I imagine of these two men working together and talking, that one is very serious and just getting the work done, and the other's kind of like, "But why do we need a wall? My cows, we don't have any cows. My trees aren't going to eat your trees. Why are we doing this?" And the other is like, "Good fences make good neighbors." Um, Now, a lot of people will read a lot of politics into this, and they'll start talking about borders and walls, but I honestly think Frost was just having some fun with his neighbor. We can think about it. I will say this, when we think about boundaries, it is healthy to have boundaries, and in the seriousness of this poem, it is good to set healthy boundaries and to protect them and to build them, right? And to maintain them. That's why I tell you I won't answer my Google Voice after hours, right? Or if I'm teaching, it's good to set those healthy boundaries. But you got to please remember there's humor in poems sometimes. Sometimes he's having some fun with somebody, and this is one of those times. He's having some fun. Okay. Other poems that you wanted to discuss, please? If not, I have suggestions, but I don't want to be the boss. I'm going to get bossy in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Last chance for asking me to cover a particular one. Okay. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Let's take a look at brass spittoons. That was going to be my pick anyway. Here we go. Brass spittoons. Now, what is a refrain? Remind me, what is a refrain? Yes. Okay, so we're going to read this and we're going to look for repeating. Okay. Who would like to read the from clean the spittoons down to $2 buy shoes for the baby? Can somebody read that? And then I'll scroll. I will volunteer somebody if they don't volunteer themselves. Angel, can you read from clean the spittoons down to buy shoes for the baby? Buy shoes for the baby. Great. Who would like to read from Buy Shoes for the Baby to the end of the poem? Brooks? Symbols, like the instrument. Okay, so let's take a look at who's writing, because sometimes in order to understand a poem, you need to know a tiny bit about the author. This is Langston Hughes. Does anybody know anything about Langston Hughes? We know Robert Frost was a New England poet, a little guy, poetry teacher, lives on a farm. What do we know about Langston Hughes? Anything? I don't know where he came from. I know he went to my alma mater. He went to Columbia University and was one of the first African Americans admitted to Columbia University. He was an African American poet famous in the Harlem Renaissance, which started in the 1920s, and the outer edge of that movement was kind of the 1940s ish. Although the big boom was in the 20s. Those authors took a hit during the Great Depression because the African American population was hit extra hard by the Great Depression. So this is an African American writer writing at the beginning half of the last century, before the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, and certainly before any civil rights legislation of the late 60s, early 70s. So we are seeing segregated workplaces. We're seeing we're seeing black codes and Jim Crow laws. Black codes are laws that are in place to curtail the movements of black people, allowing them to only work certain jobs, abide by curfews, et cetera, restrict their voting rights. The Jim Crow laws were the segregation laws that said that they had to have separate schools, separate libraries, separate bathrooms, separate water fountains, separate seating areas in restaurants, separate places in hotels, et cetera. So here you have Langston Hughes adopting a speaker. Who is the speaker in this poem? Can somebody tell me who the speaker is? Just describe the speaker. What does the speaker do for a living? He cleans the spittoons. Now, he has a baby at home, which tells us what about his age? He has a job and a child at home. What does that tell us about his age? He's an adult. He's an adult, right? But how do people refer to him? Yes. Let's talk about the politics of calling someone boy who is a grown man. Can anyone comment on the politics of that? What does that do? It's infantilizing. It makes them small, right? It's a move designed to make someone feel small and less than, right? So it was common practice for white people to call black people boy and girl as a move to disempower them. So yeah, how many times does that phrase repeat in this poem? How many times is he called boy? I've got it once. We've got another hey boy, that's twice. There's a third hey boy. Um, there's a fourth and a fifth hey boy, and then a come here boy. So we've got the word boy repeating all over with the phrase hey boy repeating no less than 4 times. Why on earth would an African American poet create a speaker that is being referred to as hey boy so many times in the poem? What's going on there? Is the speaker saying that? Or is he hearing that? How many times a day? Probably countless times a day. This is a tiny little snippet, but he probably hears it all day. Now, why put that in the poem? What is the theme of this poem? What is this speaker thinking about? He's thinking about cleaning the spit. What is a spittoon? Anybody look it up? It's a public receptacle in which people spit their tobacco juice. Is this a great job? I'm going to correct you there. Any job that pays your rent is a good job. I had a job cleaning toilets in a hotel room at one point, and it earned me the money I needed to go to college. So hats off to people who do the dirty work, right? Spend a week with no sanitation workers coming to pick up your trash and see if they are essential workers or not. They are. Go to a hotel with poor housekeeping and see if you'll stay there again. You won't, right? So this is an essential service, and it's gross. It's not a job that's probably enjoyable, but why does he stay in it? Read that $2 a day. Hey boy, a nickel, a dime, a dollar, $2 a day. Hey boy, a nickel, a dime, a dollar, $2. Buy shoes for the baby, house rent to pay. What is he doing in this poem? I think he's coaching himself through the day. I need this job. They're calling me this, but I need this job. They're calling me names. I need this job. Has anybody here ever had a situation at work where you had to put up with treatment you didn't like because you needed the job? What goes through your head all day? Right, the same as this guy, right? Mine was I would be scrubbing a toilet going, I am doing this now so I don't have to do this for the rest of my life. I am doing because I was trying to pay for college, right? As I am doing this now, so I will not have to do this for the rest of my life. I will not always have a job cleaning other people's toilets, right? But he's coaching himself. He's like, what would happen if he popped off at the people calling him boy and lost his temper? What would happen? Or let's think about the early 20th century and black and white relations, and he pops off and says, don't call me boy. Yes, fired is a given. What else? Yeah, he could put himself in real physical danger, right? So this is a time when just why don't you just stand up for yourself is not applicable advice, right? He could be putting himself in real danger if he stands up for himself. So he's coaching himself, and he coaches himself to remind himself that a bright bowl of brass is beautiful to the Lord, right? And I hope all of us, when we are doing our jobs, say to ourselves, this may not be the job of my dreams, but I'm going to do it the best I can because God put me here to do this, and here I am going to do it the best I can to be, I'm going to do it the best I can. And he's coaching himself with his religion, and he's saying, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do this for these people bossing me around and calling me names and making me feel small. I'm going to do this for God, right? Because I'm going to do this for the glory of God. At least I can offer that, right? And there's so much, and this is what I love about this poem. Here he is facing this hey boy, hey boy, hey boy over and over again, and yet he manages to hang on to his own pride. I can offer that. I have this, right? I'm valuable to the Lord. What I'm doing is valuable to God. It's valuable to my family. I'm valuable. He still has so much pride in himself. He's going to coach himself. Don't get me wrong. He's coaching himself all the way through. And he keeps getting interrupted by that hey boy, hey boy, hey boy refrain all the way through. But he is hanging in there with his pride, right? He's not going to let it defeat him, right? He can't show that pride outwardly, but he's going to hang on to it with both hands inwardly, right? That's why I love Langston Hughes's characters, because they're complicated, right? But look at the joy when he talks about his life. House rent to pay, gin on Saturday, church on Sunday, babies and gin and church, and women and Sunday, all mixed with dimes, right? He's like, yeah, I know, but he's working for the weekend, y'all. He's working for the weekend, right? But I just love how much joy and pride in himself he manages to maintain. It's strong. And yet he shows us how hard it was to hear that. That my God in the middle sounds frustrated to me. It sounds angry and frustrated to me. All right. We're going to take a look at another poem here before we go. I will let you choose between A Brown Girl Dead, A Daybreak in Alabama, The Fish, The Bean Eaters, or Dolor. I'm going to skip Abalis for throwing right now. We'll come back to it another day. But let's talk about one of the ones that maybe was difficult. Were any of them difficult for you to understand and you need help going over them? All right, let's talk about it briefly. Now, I like this poem, but I don't know if anybody else does. This is by Theodore Rethke. You would say his name Rethke. So that's how you would pronounce his name. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger if I can, so we can see it a little bit better together. And it's got a lot of words in it, so I'm going to go ahead and read it so we don't have to have it be a vocabulary lesson. I have known the inexorable sadness of pencils, neat in their boxes, dolor of pad and paperweight, all the misery of manila folders and mucilage, desolation in immaculate public places, lonely reception room, lavatory, switchboard, the unalterable pathos of basin and pitcher, ritual of multigraph, that's a Xerox from the olden days, paperclip, comma, endless duplication of lives and objects. And I have seen dust from the walls of institutions, finer than flour, alive, more dangerous than silica, sift, almost invisible, through the long afternoons of tedium, dropping a fine film on nails and delicate eyebrows, glazing the pale hair, the duplicate gray standard faces. Okay, so this is a sonnet, y'all. So thinking about our terms, this is a sonnet. How do we know it's a sonnet? Count the lines. Start by counting the lines. How many do we have? 14. And I have known thee in execrable sadness of pencils. Again, he's being loose with the meter, but we do have 5 stresses in each line. He's not doing a strong rhyme scheme here, but he's still working within that sonnet form. He's just kind of playing with it a little bit. But this is a sonnet. Sonnets kind of look like a little square chunk when you look at them from a distance. So when you see a poem that's a square chunk like this, definitely count and see if it's 14, and then see if you've got 5 stresses in each line. Any idea what it's about? Did anybody look up inexorable or immaculate or pathos or et cetera, et cetera? Any idea what this? Mm-hmm. Why is the sadness of pencils impossible to stop, y'all? I'm going to give you a hint. Rethke was a poet, but that's not how you make your money. You make your money by teaching, just like Robert Frost. So Theodore Rethke was a teacher, and he's talking about the duplicate gray standard faces and the tedium of it. Does anybody have any sense now what this is about? Year in and year out, right? I know teachers who teach the same thing and have taught the same thing for 20 something years. I can't stand it. When I get sick of these poems, I'll give my classes some different ones. And when I get sick of an assignment after 20 minutes, I'll give you a new one. You'll notice that um, my assignment, well, you won't notice it. My colleagues might notice it. My assignments change every semester. Um, all right, so I'm going to actually go ahead and stop the share so I can see everybody. We can talk about this a little bit. Let's hear from you guys. Can you ever imagine being sick of your job? Does your job ever get tedious? In what ways would a teacher's job get tedious? Yeah, if you teach the same subject over and over again. What if, oh, I gotta tell you, the students are the part that keep me going. Now, he does say that the standard gray faces, and maybe it's just all starting to repeat to him. But for me at least, that's the one part that doesn't get tedious. And I don't have troublesome students. My colleagues ask me how come everybody always behaves in my class. I'm like, I don't know. I luck out. I expect them to. I treat them like adults. I don't know, but I don't have problem students. um, all right. But I gotta tell you, there are some tedious parts to it. For every paper you write, I read 5 sets of those, and the sets are from anywhere from 15 students to 35 or 40 students. So when you turn in one paper, I read anywhere from 120 to 200 papers, all on the same subject. And I very often notice the same errors in a lot of the papers and end up writing the same comment 120 times, which after a while gets a little tedious, right? So he's talking, but that's just one job. What's tedious in your job, Shannon? What's tedious about your housework? Constantly, it's constant. Laundry folding, load after load after load of laundry just sitting there. I literally have laundry to fold like every night. It's insane. What's tedious about y'all's job? Angel, what's tedious about your job? If you're at home, what's tedious about your schoolwork? Yeah, every day. Francisco, what's tedious about what you do? It gets tedious real fast working in fast food. Brooks, what's absolutely. Brooks, what's tedious about what you do? Yep. What's tedious about your baseball practices? They got you doing any drills, or you're just like, my brain goes numb when I have to do these? Yep, it gets real old real fast. Nolan, what's tedious about what you do? Yeah, well, they're working the same skills. Kobe, anything for you that gets tedious? To you, what's the most tedious drill you do? Infield drills, you find those really tedious. Elena, what do you find tedious in what you do every day? Absolutely. All right, Jayla, what do you find tedious? Mm-hmm. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day. All right. That's Shakespeare. That's not in this class. All right. So we are going to think about themes now. In thinking about the poems that we've read today, what are some themes? I noticed choices as a theme throughout, right? What other themes have we noticed? We've noticed work being a theme, that everybody's doing some work, or a lot of people are doing work. What other themes do we have? We have economic themes, we have pride themes, we have happiness themes. What do we have? What are you noticing run through more than one poem? It doesn't have to be all of them, but what's a theme that you've noticed in more than one poem? What about it? Okay, so our everyday challenges, that's a theme. Everyday challenges is a good theme. JLo, do you notice any themes cropping up? Challenge it, how you face a challenge. I think that's a little different though. I mean, because how you face a challenge is different than just that everyday tedium, right? That we're talking about. What other themes do we see creeping up in these poems? Regret, I like that one. That's smart. Other themes that we see popping up? Now we haven't read A Brown Girl Dead, and we haven't read Daybreak in Alabama, but we do have some themes connected to race identity, and finding that inner pride in yourself. We have some economic issues in Brown Girl Dead in particular, where there's poverty that they're facing. And I think the guy in Brass Spittoons is also dealing with some poverty. I mean, he doesn't have the luxury to hop off at work and lose that job, or even walk off the job. And he's earning, what he said, as much as $2 a day, but maybe not as that high, right? So that and Brown Girl Dead, I think we both see that issue of poverty, because Brown Girl Dead, um, the mom has to sell her wedding ring to pay for her daughter's funeral. That's painful, right? To have to sell your wedding ring to pay for your daughter's funeral is, there's regret there, there's pain. Um, it's a brown girl, right? So there's race issues there. The race issues there in particular are that that's part of why she's poor, but they are going to dress her up in white and have her be the prettiest she's ever been because she deserves it. And once again, we have that pride in self, that they deserve that beautiful funeral and they're going to get it, right? And we're going to work and hustle to make sure they know they were loved and that they're honored in their funeral, even if I have to sell my wedding ring, right? So there's that pride in self. But there are those underlying, here's how society's treating me, here's how I'm dealing with being an oppressed person. Does that make sense? All right, so we've got those themes. I'm going to do a share and we're going to talk about the remaining work for this week, which is due when? When's the rest of your work due this week? Sunday, that is correct. Yes, ma'am. Don't forget to read these poems and continue to talk about those with yourself. So in week 1, part 2, we have the quiz on course information, which should be done already. You have your graded discussion board where you've done your initial post. It is time to do your responses to peers now. You do have a diagnostic essay. In week 1, part 3, you will have 2 videos post. 1 second, please.